Good afternoon. Welcome in. It's Where the 99 Lead. It's a program brought to you by the University of Pikeville where we talk about all things dealing with the University of Pikeville, academically and athletically. And our guest this afternoon, Dr. Stephen Budney, an associate professor of history at the University of Pikeville. Welcome in.
Thank you.
History, a lot of folks in my growing up, they said, what a boring subject. And I've found as I've gotten older, and I guess my days in college, even some history courses are still some of the favorite things that I've ever studied. And a lot of great stories to tell, and we're expecting those today.
Well, I hope I can provide some.
Absolutely. We'll talk about your background, where you come from, and how you arrived at the University of Pikeville.
Where I come from is a good question. My family's from Brooklyn, but I was born in Hartford, Connecticut. So I've done a lot of traveling at a very early age, but I got my did my undergraduate work and got my master's degree at the University of Maine, and then moved on to the University of Mississippi where I got my PhD and was lucky enough to study with Winthrop Jordan. And when you don't find me here in Pikeville, you'll usually find me back in Mississippi.
Back in Mississippi, indeed. How long have you been at the university now?
I've been here 11 years.
And what are some of the classes that you teach in the history department?
Well, I teach American history, and of course I teach survey level classes in American history, and I teach upper level American history, colonial right through the Gilded Age until about 1900. And I also teach World Civ, and I teach Chinese history.
We're going to talk more about that today, I know, because part of what you do with the university is globalization. And we talk about taking students abroad, learning abroad, and the opportunities provided there. And you're interested in providing those opportunities for students at the University of Pikeville, including China. Let's talk about that.
Sure, very much. There has been a move towards becoming more global at the university, to examine our diversity and really give students the opportunity to go outside of the classroom, because the classroom, I'm very conservative as far as my teaching in many ways, but the classroom, after a while, you begin to realize is a somewhat sterile environment, and you can get students out of the classroom. You can stimulate their interest, engage them, get them involved with learning more directly than you can simply in the classroom through lecture. And we're going in a couple of different directions with that, but one of them is really offering students the opportunity to travel, to leave the United States, to go somewhere else and have a completely different experience, which is educational in itself.
Absolutely. And several years ago, I know I've been told that you went to China with some students as a study abroad type program. Describe what that experience was like for you, first of all, as a professor, and for the students.
In 2005, we were, through the Appalachian College Association, we were associated with the Berger Foundation, and the Berger Foundation offered money for foreign travel if you could procure it. And I wrote a grant, and working in conjunction with the United States China People's Friendship Association, managed to secure a grant to take students from then Pikeville College, and two other Appalachian College Association colleges to China. And I took students, because of the cost, we took a faculty member from each college, and we took 3 students from each college. So I took 3 from Pikeville College, 3 from Lindsey Wilson, and 3 from Carson Newman, along with a faculty member from each of those institutions. China, for me, of course, as a teacher of Chinese history, was a wonderful experience, and very different culturally, which is exactly what I would imagine.
Sure.
But we did travel extensively. We went to most of the cities that were important historically: Beijing, Xi'an, Shanghai, which is one of the most western cities in China, and finally we went to Guilin and toured along the Li River, where they have tremendous limestone mountains. And it was for me, especially the city of Xi'an, which was really the first capital of China in the Qin dynasty, was quite an experience and something that I really wanted to see. And for the students, it was pretty interesting also.
I would imagine. How does it change the way that you would teach a Chinese history course before your trip to China and now that you've been there?
Well, I'm more connected with China now, and I feel myself better qualified to teach Chinese history now that I've been there. And I was able to, outside of Xi'an, of course, is where the tomb of the first emperor was in the Terracotta Army. And we got to see all of those things that you generally only see in pictures or see on National Geographic Channel. And actually to be there and to experience it firsthand is quite different, not only for myself, but for the students also.
Let's talk about some of the other abroad opportunities that you've had, whether they were as a professor. Have you had other opportunities to travel to different locations?
I have, through the university and on my own. Of course, I've been to Germany. My wife was German, and so I've spent quite a bit of time in Germany. I can speak German. I have also, through the Keese Foundation, which works with the University of Pikeville, I got to go to Mexico in 2003, and I was going to teach in Mexico in 2009. Unfortunately, that summer session was canceled due to unrest in that country, right. Which was, I would have gone in any case, but I felt safe. But
others felt differently.
Right, other factors intervened.
Yes. Talking with Dr. Stephen Budney, Associate Professor of History at the University of Pikeville. You're interested in creating study abroad opportunities for students at the University of Pikeville. Those opportunities obviously have been there. What opportunities can students look forward to in the nearest future?
We have a couple of different opportunities to study abroad. One of the ones that's been used the most by students in the last few years has been the London program. And we've had several students over the years take advantage of that. In the last few years, we're more closely associated with the Kentucky Institute for International Studies, or KEIS, which offers students a chance to study in a variety of places, in a variety of locales. For example, this year, and it's beginning to take hold now, which is encouraging. It took a couple of years to get it going. And finally this year we have students who are going to be studying this summer in Paris, in Berlin, and Tanzania, and in China, which of course makes me happy.
Wow. As a professor, what is the teaching experience in another country like?
I would have had a better grip on that if I had actually gone down and had a classroom in Mexico, which I didn't. But traveling and teaching students it's kind of doing it on an ad hoc basis. Of course, when I was in China, we were doing it on the go.
Sure.
And we were constantly on the move. So it was a little more difficult, and it depended more on students writing down their experiences and what they derived from the experience. But when you take students to a foreign country like China, I found it was a learning experience for the students, and really, in some ways, they teach themselves. You're learning how to be more independent. You're learning how to deal with a much different environment. And so that's part of the learning process, and that's something I can't teach them in the classroom.
Sure.
That's something I can't provide. That's a personal experience that they were able to derive from the experience.
That's part of why a travel abroad, study abroad program will be so important. Personal experiences take much deeper root with the student than something that's taught in the classroom. Wouldn't that be true?
It's very true. And I've found with many of the students that have gone and participated in, say, the London program, some students which were my advisees and I dealt with personally, it instills a greater sense of self-confidence in the student to have been able to travel somewhere, to have been able to participate and maybe even survive in a foreign culture. I think survive is probably the wrong word, but I think after they first get there and after the first week, they probably feel as though they have.
Sure.
Also, the sense of camaraderie that we got in China. I had a diverse group of students, and if you've ever traveled on a tour, you know that people have diverse interests, people are different, people don't always get along.
Sure.
You always have someone on the tour that doesn't get along. When we were in China, I'm not going to say everybody was best friends, but everybody realized that we were in a foreign environment together and we had to stick together. And they worked
Right.
together and watched out for each other and took care of each other. And I think that was part of the learning experience. And it was gratifying for me to see that. It was a wonderful group.
In that type of situation, I would imagine everyone pretty focused on the task.
Yes. Yes. And very much focused on watching out for each other.
Sure. Talking about history, Chinese history, and there's been a lot of talk locally with Pikeville as a city, with a sister city from China. Also, we've heard that there was a delegation of educators and administrators from Beijing City University that you had a chance to meet with recently. They're visiting colleges and universities in the United States. What can you tell us about their visit to this part of the country?
I got to meet the Chinese delegation a couple of weeks ago, and it was an interesting experience. They're very interested in sending students to the University of Pikeville, or possibly other colleges in Kentucky. And what they're trying to do is transfer two-year business students over here to finish up their degrees. Now, I was able to meet with them outside of Lexington, and I was able to spend quite a bit of time with them. I would like to teach in China. Unfortunately, at their college, you have to be able, all the courses are in Mandarin.
Aha.
Which I don't have a grasp of Mandarin as of yet. I can probably say 4 or 5 words of Chinese.
Right.
And one of the things, they have an advantage on us because they're able to speak English and Mandarin,
Yes.
and really are required when they're children to learn a second language, which probably isn't a bad idea
Right.
for us to begin thinking about becoming bilingual
Right.
as a nation. I know there's resistance to that, but unfortunately it seems to be the way of the world.
Seems to be. Seems to be. Why the interest in that university, the Chinese delegation, in having students finish here in the States?
Well, I think if you look, they're looking to send business people over here, which would certainly give them a handle on what our business practices are, would give them obviously the practical experience of having studied in the United States and knowing the United States and knowing its culture and its people much better. And that would definitely give them a competitive advantage, I would think.
Is this something you see happening in the very near future?
I think it probably will. I do see it probably happening in the near future, and I think there was genuine interest on their part in seeing some of their students begin to take classes here. We will have this summer, I believe from one of the secondary schools in China, we will have some students on campus.
Very good.
So
Very good. So globalization, it's happening.
it's taking place.
It's
Yes,
happening
it is.
at the University of Pikeville. Where the 99 lead, we talk about the University of Pikeville, and we talk about where the 99 steps that lead to campus, but they also lead from campus to the community and now truly to the world, tying the world to the University of Pikeville campus, those 99 steps. Talking with Dr. Stephen Budney, an associate professor of history, and let's talk about some different careers your students have pursued in the course of your role as a professor. Maybe some of the different careers your students have landed in, particularly those maybe that have traveled abroad during their college days.
Sure. I have one student, actually 2 students who participated in the London program who have done well. One is now a supervisor at Mountain Comprehensive Care in Prestonsburg. I have another student who I helped get into foreign travel, wrote her several letters of recommendation, who went on and who is in Washington now and who works with Greenpeace. So those are two personal success stories. We also have other students who have participated. Tara McKenzie was a student who traveled to Australia and then did archaeological work. She's working in Washington, I believe, as a woman's advocate. So the students who have traveled generally, I think, tend to do quite well.
Right.
Once they return. They do have that. They do have an edge.
As a professor, you take a lot of pride in your students, I would imagine.
I do.
And particularly those maybe that go outside the box of where you might expect them to land. And I would imagine some of those stories you just mentioned are outside the box. You don't expect them to end up there.
No, and it's exciting for me because it gives me a feeling of accomplishment also, that I've helped them in some way. Probably inadequate, but I've helped them in some way maybe, and had some influence. And that's really what teaching is about.
We've talked a little about the University of Pikeville students, where they visited in the past, China, the London project. What are some other destinations that Pikeville students have traveled to in the past?
Well, as I said, there's China, there's Mexico. We're really just starting to get students out there in something beyond the London program. But as I said, Australia is another destination some students went to, Ireland, and they're beginning now, and they've been to Germany also.
Right.
But we're beginning to branch out. Of course, if you think about it, Europe is a fairly comfortable destination.
Sure.
And we're beginning to branch out now, seeing Tanzania, beginning to see students going on their own to study in China for the summer.
Right.
It takes a special student to do that.
Sure.
But they are there, and if the availability, if the opportunities are there, and one of the problems has been the money, and if the money is there where we can help the students in some way, that's going to help expand the program also.
Right.
That's going to get more people involved, and that's another thing that we've been working on.
What are some opportunities to travel abroad, study abroad? What are some opportunities that are coming up in the future for UPike students?
We're working on a variety of things. The standards are there. The Kentucky Institute for International Studies is there. We also have KEI. Some of this is something that students will have to try to get together. These are programs they can look into on their own, but we do have people to help them along the way. I talked to the representatives from Beijing City University and tried to see if maybe I could work something out with them where, even though they speak Mandarin, they speak enough English, they were willing to see if possibly I would bring some students over there, and for maybe 2 weeks during the summer. So that's something that I'd have to look into getting funding for. But they were willing to do that, and I think that would be a good experience for students.
It's all about money.
Also. It is all about money.
And an expensive proposition. Anytime you send someone overseas and study abroad programs, it takes a lot of money. And these students, they don't necessarily have that at their disposal.
They don't, and it's something that we're trying to provide now through experiential learning programs. I know I mentioned some of the places where students have been. I understand you've had Chandra Massner here, who's taken students to Costa Rica, another aspect of the KEYS program.
And I guess
she does a wonderful job with that.
Some of the music students this semester will be traveling to Ireland as well.
Yes.
So we're the 99 lead, truly becoming a worldwide destination, heading off those 99 steps. Dr. Stephen Budney, we talk about some of your travels. Maybe you have some interesting stories to tell about your trips. Maybe some of your food experience. That's the one nearest and dearest to my heart.
Food.
Is to hear about.
You're a foodie.
When you travel. I want to hear about different types of food.
Okay. One of the more interesting things, when I was in China, we went to one of the southern provinces and went to Guilin, where the Li River is. And in a restaurant, as I was leaving, I noticed what looked like a rather large apothecary jar with, it looked like apple juice. It was some yellow fluid and obviously had snakes floating in it. And it was labeled in English and Chinese, 3 Snakes Wine. And I said, well, that's got to be something for the tourists. Just a joke.
Yes.
Well, when we went on the cruise, after we'd had lunch, one of the waiters came around, and he had one of these jars, and it's poisonous snakes, because the Chinese believe, of course, that the bile from the liver is good for your eyesight and your brain process. And they were offering shots of the 3 Snakes wine for, I think, probably the equivalent of $2.50, but no one really wanted to seem to try it, so I decided I'd try it.
You were the one.
And it was interesting, to say the least. As soon as I took just a sip, I had an electric feeling at the top of my head. Much like my hair was standing on end, but more like I was getting an electrical charge or something.
How about some interesting stories about the cultural differences, some places that you've, whether it be China, Germany, wherever some of your travels have taken you, an interesting story about the contrasting cultures.
When I was in Mexico, for some reason, my Spanish is limited. I would never go hungry or thirsty in Mexico because I can speak Spanish well enough to feed myself and to find out how much things cost. But my conversational Spanish is somewhat limited. When I was in Mexico, we were in Morelia, which is a beautiful old colonial city in Michoacan province. And we were, each of us, placed with a family. Now, for some reason, I got placed farther out than anyone else, right on, almost to the outskirts of the city. And my family was wonderful, and I had a good time with them, but you have a choice. You could walk in every day, which I really couldn't do from that distance, or get them to drive me in. And I said, well, rather than have them drive me in, why don't I take the bus? Because they had a bus, but you don't take the bus in Morelia, and you don't really take the bus necessarily in Mexico City. They have what they call combis, which are Volkswagen buses, which are color-coded. And if you're going to a certain part of the city, you stand there and you wait at the bus stop until the gray, it's almost like the subway, till the gray number 3 comes, or the green. And I was taking the gray, the number 3, every day into the center of Morelia to the Key Center, and from there we'd leave on wherever we were going. What's interesting is if you leave at rush hour, of course, the Volkswagen bus pulls up. There's no seating inside, really. Everyone stands behind the driver in these little Volkswagen buses, and the door simply slides open. You get in if you can. And when you get in, when you get on a bus in the city, of course, they've got the money changer right there that you put your coins in. Well, there's nothing like that in Morelia. If you get in and you get towards the back of the bus, you hand your 50 centavos or whatever to the person ahead of you, and they hand it to the person ahead of them and ahead of them until it gets to the driver, who then makes change, and it's handed back from hand to hand to hand till it gets to you. And you never get shortchanged, which is interesting. But going every day with the citizens of Morelia and simply traveling like that was an interesting cultural experience, and no one thought anything different about having me on board. So it just shows me when you travel and when you get to know people from different countries, from different regions in different countries, people are people. And you don't notice the differences that we think are there when we sit here in our own insulated little world.
And we are terribly insulated. We are terribly insulated. That's what the globalization does, the study abroad programs. We want to bust the insulation and have UPike students out there and bringing those experiences back here.
I think so. I think that the world is coming to Pikeville. and we need to prepare our students for it.
Whether we like it or not, here they come. And whether the world likes it or not, here come our students.
Right.
Dr. Stephen Budney, it's been great to have you today. Of course, professor of history at the University of Pikeville. If someone would like to talk with you about a study abroad program or possibly a future student at the University of Pikeville, they're considering majoring in history or political science, and they'd like to talk to a professor, how could they get in touch?
I'm readily available. I'm in 111 Wickham, and you could simply call the desk, and they could connect you with me. I'm there 5 days a week.
Great stories today. Great stories today. I can only imagine what it would be like to sit in one of your lectures and hear more of the stories about some of your travels and how they relate to particularly Chinese history.
It wouldn't be as much fun as if I could take you there.
It'd be great. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Stephen Budney, our guest today on Where the 99 Lead. Thanks for tuning in.